tonight, Marty, but I think Hollywood would have sent me threatening letters because the Tennessee whiskey trail's on tonight. It's a Friday night. What on earth are we doing here? It's a special, of course.
Justin, if you'd have played that, Zuckerberg would have got you again. He'd have done you again.
Probably would.
Today, he would. Today, folks, it's International Tennessee Whiskey Day, and we're joined by Sara Beth Urban, who is the director or the chair of Tennessee Whiskey Guild. Sarah, how are we?
We're doing great. We're excited. It's Tennessee Whiskey Day. This has been a long time coming, and we're glad to be recognized around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, everybody, we'll not go straight into it yet, but Tennessee whiskey for lots of people is one brand, really. That's what they think, but it's an exciting, dynamic, totally diverse whiskey range now in region. And tell us more about Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah, so of course, the elephant in the room is that Jack Daniel's is the most prevalent Tennessee whiskey across the world. And but yes, we have a huge industry that's growing in Tennessee, and it's relatively young. That's why you don't hear a lot about some of the smaller brands, or you can't get them on the international stage, because distilleries beyond Jack Daniel's, George Dickel, and a distillery called Pritchard's were the only ones in existence up until 2009. That's when the law changed in Tennessee to allow distilleries outside of 3 counties. And so by and large, the Tennessee whiskey industry is roughly hitting a decade old.
It's incredible. Now, you mentioned the law there. Explain about that. How there was a law change in 2009. Explain
before that. And it sounds so strange when you say it, but before that, distilleries in Tennessee were limited to 3 counties. And beyond, there are 95 counties in Tennessee, so only 3 counties could have a operating distillery. And that law was changed by a group of distillers who came together and said, we want to work here in Tennessee. We want to be able to, operate in our home counties. So they worked to have that changed. And fortunately they did, because now we have, I think, about 74 of our counties in Tennessee allow for distilleries. And we have 31 members in the Tennessee Distillers Guild.
That's fabulous. I mean, it's such a quite rapid growth in distilleries. Now, you have a very good heritage of whiskey distilling in Tennessee. I mean, it goes back really to the start of distilling in the US. So tell us a bit more about that, and I'll tell you.
Yeah, so our modern industry is obviously very young. Distillation in Tennessee goes back to the very beginning, absolutely. Actually, several of the brands that are open now are reopenings of historic distilleries. So Nelson's Greenbrier in Nashville, which is growing rapidly, they're great. I'm probably getting the greats wrong, but it was their grandfather. They stumbled upon this old distillery in Greenbrier, Tennessee, and were like, oh, wait, did our family used to own and run a distillery? Oh, yeah, they did. So they reopened it, and they make a wonderful Tennessee whiskey that I love. Old Dominic in Memphis is a similar story. And then obviously one of the coolest stories that's come out in the last few years has been Uncle Nearest, which is actually the story of the slave who taught Jack Daniel's how to distill. Yeah. And they have created a brand around Nearest Green and his family, and actually are just down the road from Jack Daniel's. You can hit 2 and 1 when you head down there.
Well, we interviewed Greg Oliver, who made Chasing Whiskey, the documentary about Jack Daniel's, and I watched the documentary and thought it was fabulous. And it was nice the way they actually brought Nearest Green and told the story of Nearest Green in it, and it's rediscovering some of the history and righting some of the wrongs of the past. People have taken over, and stories that haven't been told being retold. And I always tell people that's one of the things that whiskey does that there's not really any other spirit can do. You can't really tell those stories with vodka or really with gin. They just don't really happen. It's not the same kind of thing. Now, there is a connection between where Justin and I are from. We're sitting up here in Northern Ireland, up in the County Antrim coast, And there is a connection between us and Tennessee. Justin was talking about the Davy Crockett thing last night when we done our little preview. The Davy Crockett's ancestors come from this part of the world. Andrew Jackson, the president, from just up the road from near where Justin is. But my favourite one is Andrew Johnson, former president, who decided at his inauguration that he would have a few whiskies. So his family are just from up the road from between me and Justin, from a place called Larne. So at his inauguration, he decided to have a few whiskies, and his speech was supposed to last 5 minutes, and it lasted 15. So that's the kind of person that Justin and I would both vote for.
It is, to be honest, Sarah. And about 1,000 people a year left Larne for North America every year from about 1711 up until about 1911 before the proper scheduled ships came in, But they didn't always go down too well with ice, like the Titanic.
Well, you guys are talking my language. So my background is also in history. I work for the Distillers Guild now, but my master's degree is in public history. I used to work in museums, and then I worked in tourism, and that's how I ended up with the Tennessee Whiskey Trail, is kind of promoting them and doing some of the advocacy work. So you guys are talking my language, but of course you guys happen to pick one of the worst presidents in U.S. history.
Oh yes, but he's from over here, so we have to sort of go, well, he's still one of our lot. He's just. Anybody who, if someone got up at their inauguration and said, you know something, I'm going to have a drink at my inauguration, have a celebration, he would probably still get my vote, if I'm totally honest. Forget the politics. It's all right. No.
Well, my mom's family were McMurrays, so I'm from somewhere in that region over there.
Oh, you must be.
So Richard Jones has been in touch. He says he's got a bottle of Uncle's and he's saving it for the right moment to open it. Tell us a little bit about more of that one, Sarah.
Yeah, so like I said, Uncle Nearest is the brand that's kind of it's exploded in the past few years. Vaughn Weaver is the CEO, and she and her team have just done a phenomenal job creating this brand. It's not even a revival. It's really it's telling the story of Nearest Green, how he taught Jack Daniels how to distill, and then as we mentioned, really giving that legacy its due and really telling that story, which is just, it's been such an amazing thing to have here in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Lovely stuff. And Richard Jones has added the normal Larne story, get out when you can.
Richard's been to Larne. People from Larne are affectionately known as harbour rats because it's down at the harbour. It's not that affectionate, to be fair, but that's what they're doing.
I was like, I'm not going to call people that when I meet them from there.
Oh, don't worry about it. They're well used to it. They get that all the time. Now, it's Tennessee Whiskey Day. How did that come about? Why did you pick today, or why is it this day in particular?
Yeah, so
legislation?
I guess we should mention why it's Tennessee whiskey too. Very different. What categorizes Tennessee whiskey? Why this is so different from World Whiskey Day or anything like that? The phrase is that all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. But Tennessee whiskey is a type of bourbon, but we have a couple additional parameters on there. One, that it has to be made in Tennessee. And two, that it has to go through the Lincoln County process, which has to be filtered through charcoal. And so that is the very specific parameters that go into Tennessee whiskey. And it's something that, Jack Daniels, George Dickel, all those places, they have perfected that. And then a lot of our distilleries in Tennessee are doing their own version of that and creating that product, although some of them don't have it yet, because just like bourbon, it has to age for at least 3 years. So some of them are still waiting to put their Tennessee whiskey on the market, and we'll be excited to taste it when it does. But it honestly came about because, there's so many days out there. There's World Whiskey Day. There's all these days that get to celebrate, and we're kind of one of those few products that really has a region. We're Tennessee whiskey. It has to be from here. It has to go through this very specific process. And we wanted to recognize that, and also recognize our distillery's contribution to Tennessee. It's so much more than just producing good spirits. supporting the agriculture industry. It's the tax dollars that come back to support the state of Tennessee. It's just such an important part of this. And we wanted not only for our legislators to know that, but for the whole world to kind of see about our products and also to hear more about Tennessee whiskey. There's so many more that are going to be coming online. And obviously, I love Jack Daniels. I love George Dickel. We've got some great Tennessee whiskeys, but I think we're going to see an explosion of growth in this category over the next few years. And it's going to be so exciting and so tasty.
The fact that you have that regionality gives you a starting point for everything else. I always think there's lots of people want to be iconoclasts and knock down the big guys, be critical of the big guys, and we want to do things different. But the big guys really are brand leaders. They're the people you can come in on the coattails of. And whenever you have something like Jack Daniels, and everybody's aware of, I've been wearing this.
Exactly.
It's one of the most common brands imaginable, and all these new people have a little bit of familiarity with a Tennessee whiskey, and they'll be able to just touch into this and explore and try new things that are maybe done slightly differently, but in it's a slightly different method. And there's so many of them. I have a list of all of the 31 distilleries. We have George Dickel, as you say, Junction 35 Spirits, King's Family, Knox Whiskey Works, Lost State Distillery, Nelson Green, Breer, Old Dominic, Old Forge, Old Glory, Old Tennessee, Old Smoky, Postmodern, just to be a bit different.
There's a lot of olds in there.
There's a lot of old people here. They're appealing to a certain demographic. but there's all these new distilleries who are going to take their own little take on what's already a classic product. And hopefully then they'll have their own stuff coming with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that was the important factor too of creating the Tennessee Whiskey Trail, is we wanted people to be able to come to Tennessee and see where these spirits are made and hear the stories. Yeah. And what I think is so different and kind of unique from what you experience on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, which a lot of people know about and have gone on, in Tennessee, you can still meet the founder of that distillery. You can still meet the person who created the original recipe, why they did it and what the backstory is and all those things. Whereas in Kentucky, you've got all these legacy brands that were so far generations removed that, some of the stories, who knows how much truth there are to them. In Tennessee, we're just now making up our fables, our legacies. You can still hear the real story. And then in, 100 years, we'll see where we are.
Well, some of these guys, if they only started in 2009, some of them are probably still in their 20s.
Yeah, we've got some young ones. We've got, honestly, it's so fun to just, when you do the trail, just to go from one facility to the next and see the difference. I mean, even when you get, so you mentioned a couple of them, Lost State up in Bristol, Tennessee is on the state line between Tennessee and Virginia. It's this tiny little facility and it's family run, and Nick and his family are great. But then when you go to places like Jack Daniels and you see the magnitude of it, you kind of think, corporate, oh my gosh, this is huge. This is just one of those legacy brands. But you forget that they're in this tiny little town in Tennessee called Lynchburg, and the county is dry. You can't drink there. And they're real people. I mean, it's so down home. I mean, yesterday they were all wearing Nashville Predators shirts and cheering for hockey. So we're very laid back and fun here in Tennessee, and I think that's we take it seriously, but not too seriously. Kind of like your podcast. I mean, we want to be serious about it. We're excited, but we also want to have fun while we do it. You're
actually split into 3 regions, and Memphis is a way out there all on its own. Is there going to be more pop up in between? Because
yes, that is the numbers alone are growing rapidly. We know there are more distilleries that will open. But yes, there will be more in West Tennessee soon. Old Dominic will not be alone out there in Memphis for too much longer.
I checked this. There's 7 million people in Tennessee. Okay, but you're making 250 million barrels. I mean, the numbers are incredible. It's just incredible the scale of the industry. And you say it's growing apace above that.
It is, yes. I mean, obviously, a very large amount of our gallonage right now comes from Jack Daniels.
Of course.
But our distilleries are looking to catch up, and I think too, just because you mentioned that, there's really only one that you guys have access to. We're working with our local Department of Agriculture within the state of Tennessee to start doing more exports. We actually have a group coming in from Europe. I can't remember what the exact countries are, but they're coming and they're doing a tour of Tennessee whiskey distilleries so that they can figure out which ones they want to take back with them. So we're excited. I think in the next few years, you'll see a lot of growth in the Tennessee whiskey market and hopefully be able to get more bottles over there.
Well, I absolutely. Now there's tariffs and this stupid trade war by the exporting and importing of spirits between the US and EU and UK and all this. And I mean, because they give money to an aircraft industry, they punish the spirits trade. That beats me. Don't understand that at all. But there seems to be a bit of a relaxation in some of this.
We've been working nonstop to kind of put this on the forefront because in June, actually, those tariffs double. So it'll go from 25% to 50%, which will shut down the market pretty substantially. I mean, beyond Jack and a few other large brands, there won't be anyone who can afford it. We don't want that to happen because spirits bring people together. We want Irish whiskeys over here as much as we want our whiskeys to go over there. It's about bringing people together and experiencing these things. So we've had some positive news on that front, but I don't think it's quite settled yet. But I have hope that it'll get back to normal.
It seems to be going in the right direction, which it seems to be going back to having much less tariffs. I really look forward to getting some of these brands because we've been talking to some of the other people and they're doing, for many in the US, above and beyond the Tennessee brand, they're actually doing some really, really exciting stuff as their brands, which in that regard, it's kind of like the Wild West in some ways because they can do basically whatever they like and still get it called whiskey. And some of the stuff they're doing is really exciting. So what other than the Tennessee whiskey, what in whiskey made in Tennessee excites you?
Oh gosh. So, well, I actually usually kind of mention that beyond whiskey, we also have so many other spirits. So when you go out into East Tennessee, obviously there is a huge history in the Appalachian region of moonshine.
Yeah.
We have a lot of distilleries in East Tennessee that are producing unbelievable flavors of moonshine. And it's amazing to see. And then you've got H. Clark, which is in Thompson Station outside of Nashville. He's got the best gin in the world, hands down. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. I'm going to drop that mic and say he's got the best gin, hands down. So,
lots of people over here making gin, so we have to be very careful about that.
Their own take on things. It's amazing to see. Chattanooga Whiskey in Chattanooga, obviously, are creating some amazing products. Their 91 and their 111 are award winners on a regular basis. And it's it's a Tennessee bourbon whiskey. So there's always something new coming out. Like you said, it's kind of the Wild West. They get to play around with flavors and find out which of these brands are going to be their legacy, which barrel is going to be the legacy barrel that they base everything else off of. That's where we're at right now in Tennessee. And it's fun to watch them experiment and explore and figure out what's next.
Yeah. Now, Sarah, I know you're going to have to be very diplomatic about this, but what whiskey do you drink?
Oh, I'm not allowed to admit a favorite. I will go ahead and say that. But to give you a few of the ones that are in my bar right now,
okay.
I am a huge fan of the George Dickel Bottled and Bond series that's been coming out. They just released their spring, and I'm actually headed out after this to go get a bottle for tonight. I mentioned Chattanooga whiskey because I love Chattanooga whiskey. We always have a bottle of 91 and 111 in here. And then we always have Jack Daniel's Black Label around. So I hit some of the highlights, but like I said, I keep H. Clark's gin in here. I'm a huge fan. We've got Corsair. You guys talked about Corsair, talking to Corsair. They do a lot of really unique flavors, and their triple smoked is so good. And then I will say too, one that I'm super partial to is Old Dominic in Memphis. my youngest name is actually Dominic. And that is a total coincidence. I did not name my child after distillery.
Are you sure?
After my husband's great uncle, but
we believe you.
I'm a little partial to them.
Yeah, are you sure that? Oh no, we didn't actually name my son after a whiskey that I was drinking. No.
Well, it's a funny thing too. Is my oldest is James David, so sometimes we call him JD, which is people are like, "What did you just name all your kids after distillery?"
Yep. My oldest son, Dickel.
Well, it was one of those things when people ask me, like, "What's the next one going to be?" Old Smoky.
What sort of food goes well with whiskey then, Sara?
Well, I mean, I'm here in Nashville, which is the hot chicken capital of the world. I don't know how well that pairs with whiskey, but we're also obviously in Memphis is one of the capitals of barbecue. We do a lot of barbecue down here. It's real good. And you know, I mean, anything that you would drink with a regular bourbon goes well with Tennessee whiskey. I'll say that.
Ooh, I look forward to it. I
know where Justin's going with this.
Marty, do you know where I'm going?
I do.
The countdown has started. There he is, the man himself. The rib commander, Kerry Bringle, is there. Hello, Kerry. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are y'all doing today?
Good, man. Good.
We'll be doing better if you could actually get the Star Trek thing to beam some of your ribs over to my computer station here, just right in front of me. That would be lovely.
That'd be great.
Kerry, when I told Justin, I said we've got a barbecue pit master coming on.
Yeah.
And I said, look, here's the website, send it over. I was actually had him on a video call, and I could see his wee face like that. You could almost see the drill running down his wee chin. So, Kerry, nice. Tell us what you do.
So I'm Kerry Bringle. I've got the Peg Leg Porker brand. We have Peg Leg Porker restaurant here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we specialize in West Tennessee barbecue and dry ribs in particular. We do whole hog as well sometimes, and we do pork and chicken. We do what we call real Tennessee barbecue. There's no brisket at this restaurant. If you want that, we say go to Texas. All right. Actually, I'm about to open up another restaurant in town called Bringle Smoking Oasis, and that'll have brisket and beef ribs and all that. I'm also the owner of Peg Leg Porker Spirits, and so we have our Peg Leg Porker Bourbon. We have a white label, which is a 4 to 6 year old, a gray label, which is an 8 year old, a black label, which is a 12-year-old, and then this last year we just released our 15-year-old, which is a Pitmaster Reserve limited edition right there, and we just won a platinum award at the SIP Awards with that, plus a double gold and the innovation trophy for bottle design. So we're real excited about that, and so we're distributed in about 12 states now, and we're soon to be over in the UK. We're about to ship a pallet of our 8-year-old over to the UK, and I believe right now you can probably find us at the Savoy Hotel in London. But we hope to be around Europe. We've got distribution over there, and we like it because I like to visit over there, and I actually have a Scottish background. My grandmother was a Bruce, so I'm actually a descendant of Robert the Bruce.
Well,
so
I'll tell you this now. Robert the Bruce. The famous story of Robert the Bruce is he got beat and he came over to a place called Rathlin Island, and he watched the wee spider come down and it dropped off, and then it built its web again and blew away, and he kept it, and I must go back. He was inspired by the spider. Now Rathlin Island's about 50, not even 15 miles away from me. So we have a connection there, Kerry. We have a connection.
Nice, I like it.
And Robert the Bruce's brother, Edward the Bruce, what year was it, Marty? 1215 or something like that?
No, 1315 he arrived in Larne.
1315 he arrived in Larne, which we were talking about earlier. And he was then crowned High King of Ireland a couple of years later at Dundalk or Drogheda or somewhere like that.
He was the last ever High King of all Ireland.
Yeah.
So Edward. So yeah. Now you said you're available in the Savoy. I would need Justin's money to go to the Savoy now.
It's not cheap, right?
No.
I have been in the Savoy, Marty, but it's you can't go there at the minute because we're sort of open, still in lockdown. English people can come here, but we can't go to London until Monday. That's how bad it is. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. Now, Kerry, give me a tip, because Justin came down here last night and I cooked them some. Now they are lovely. It's Glenarm beef, and I live up in a little bit up in a hill in a glen.
Yep.
And the castle's just down at the bottom here, and they have shorthorn beef, that's Himalayan salt house aged. Give us a tip for cooking steak. What's the best way of doing it?
On a steak, I like to do, what some people call a reverse sear. So I take that steak and I'll cook it, or a lot of times I'll smoke it. So I might smoke that steak with hickory at about 250 and smoke it until I get an internal temperature of about 130. And then I'm going to take it and put it on the hottest side of the grill with my coals real hot, up to 500 or 700 degrees, and sear the outside of that steak like that. I like to season it with kosher coarse ground salt and a little bit of black pepper, and it's a great steak.
This is the steak I got made last night. Would that pass your ratings? Would it, Kerry? Would that get your ratings? I'll make it full screen here. I'll make it full screen. There you go. Look at that there steak.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. Looks like it's seared up pretty good. How'd it taste?
It tasted pretty good, but I think I need another one tomorrow night just to make sure.
There you go.
You can pay for them.
Absolutely.
No, now what goes best for you? What type of whiskey with what type of meat?
Well, so I have a Tennessee straight bourbon. Bourbon is my drink of choice, and so that's what ours is. Our bourbon is done with the difference with my bourbon is that I'm a non-distilling producer, and so I take bourbon that I have either contract distilled or I buy in, and then I take it and I develop the process of filtering it through hickory charcoal after it's debarreled. So whereas the Lincoln County process is filtering through sugar maple charcoal after the white dog process and before it goes into the barrel, when we debarrel peg leg porker, we then run it through hickory charcoal that I personally burn down and make those coals, and it gives it a nice finish. It's not smoked, but it gives it just a hint. And so it's perfect with pork barbecue. It's great with ribs, or it's great with pulled pork, or if you get a whole hog, it's really great when you're eating some of that belly meat. There's so much fat there that bourbon or whiskey really cuts through that fattiness. The same with brisket. If you get fatty brisket, whiskey goes great with it because that whiskey will cut right through that fat, and the sharpness of it will dampen down and soften that fat on your palate.
So, sounds fabulous. I believe Sara Beth Urban actually knows you but has never met you. Is that true?
I think we've probably talked on the phone, but I don't think we've met face to face.
No, I don't think we have. I was mentioning that I started right before the pandemic, and so once it hit, I wasn't really able to get out and see anybody. So it's nice to finally put a face to a name.
Well, thank you. It's nice to meet you as well.
Now, we've got a comment in there. Stuart Press is saying he loves bourbon, just ventured in a few months back. There are a few winners out there, need to get back to Tennessee and Kentucky once the borders are open. I'd love to go to the Kentucky Derby, to be honest, and probably, I have to admit it, get to Nashville and Memphis as well, and maybe Gracelands, even though I say to Marty, I don't like Elvis, you know what I mean? You know,
and I threaten to throw things at him. You're not allowed to besmirch the name of Elvis Presley, all right? You can do many things.
Graceland's for everybody. You don't need to like Elvis to go there. You just got to experience Graceland.
I've loved Elvis since I was a kid. So, no, it's just awesome. Now, there's a mention of Kentucky and Tennessee. Is there a rivalry? Is there?
Yes. Definitely. There always has been, and it's gotten worse lately. But
it's the battle.
It's all in good fun. It's fun.
The battle of the barrels, going back to the late 1800s or something like that. That sounds like the battle of the handcarts between Withersea and Hornsey in the Middle Ages, which is still going on in England.
Yes, it's all in good fun for sure, but I do think there's some fun rivalries to be had.
Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with the battle rivalry, so it's all good. It's good, healthy rivalry.
Hey, it's good promotion for both of us, right?
Absolutely, right. Absolutely. Now, we were talking the other day to the Corsair distillery, and they flipped because they originally opened in Kentucky and then moved just across the border once the law had changed. it's something that would only sort of happen in the US. It wouldn't really happen over here, where people are like, we'll open here, and once the law changes, we'll sneak across the border. And it was quite fun talking to them. And
they did well, and they've got 2 distilleries here in Nashville, and they're building a third right now. Actually, my new restaurant that I'm building is literally 20 feet away from the new Corsair distillery that they're building over in the Nations. It's a beautiful building, and it looks like you're going to have a really nice place there.
It's great to have that success. It really is. That people are doing that well, and they're obviously doing something right. Even if
Corsair has done a lot of experimental stuff, and so they've done a lot of really unique and innovative products. And then they've also ventured into some single malt whiskeys, and so they've sort of dabbled in that Scotch type area, whereas most of the distillers here in Tennessee have stuck with Tennessee whiskey or Tennessee bourbon. Corsair has really stepped into some interesting areas with some experimental stuff that sort of set them apart.
Yeah, they have. It was really fascinating talking to him, and we're going to play a little bit of the interview that we did with Ryan the other evening, because he couldn't make it tonight, but we recorded a little bit of an interview with him, and Justin's going to play it, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
International Tennessee Whiskey Day. What does that mean for you as a company at Corsair?
Well, yeah, Tennessee is near and dear to our hearts. Obviously, the 2 founders were born and raised there. We are located there. We have 3 distilleries in Tennessee, and employ a fair number of Tennesseans. So anything that shines a little bit of light on the spirits industry and any kind of agricultural business within Tennessee is a huge benefit to us as a community. And in addition to that, Tennessee whiskey gets a little bit of a bad rap because it's bourbon, but it's been charcoal filtered through sugar maple charcoal. And I don't think that it gets the recognition that it kind of deserves. A lot of people lump it into bourbon.
I think everybody likes to be an iconoclast. Everybody likes to knock down somebody that's doing really well. We recently interviewed a guy, Greg Oliver, who made a documentary about Jack Daniels. And no matter what anybody says about Jack Daniels, lots and lots and lots of people like it. And I for one, never knock anybody for enjoying a whiskey. If they enjoy Jack Daniels or they only drink 21-year-old Macallans, up to yourself. As long as you enjoy it, that's entirely up to you. But I want to ask you quickly about the tourism aspect. Obviously, with COVID, things have been very strange for a period of time now. But tourism's a big thing for you in Corsair as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We about half of our revenue and profit come from our distilleries. So from tours, tastings,
wow,
sales, that sort of thing.
Wow,
yeah, it's absolutely huge. Tourism in Nashville, Nashville is like one of the top tourist destinations in the United States, and that's surprising because it's completely landlocked, right?
Hang on, Elvis.
Oh no! Oh no, we're not going to talk about Elvis, are we? Oh no!
Shush, behave, Jed. You go back. You listen to Woody Guthrie or some of them other people that you listen to, right? We're talking about Elvis, Tennessee, Elvis. That's all we need. And Dolly Parton as well. 2 of the coolest people ever.
I agree that they're the coolest people ever, but Nashville has become a very metropolitan city, and it's got draws other than the Grand Ole Opry and old school country and rock music. It's a very vibrant city now, and it's got a great food and beverage scene. Yeah. And we're growing 5 to 7% every single year, and tourists love to come, enjoy it. And they come to our distilleries, and a big part of that is the support that we get from the Tennessee Whiskey Trail, which, going back to the start of the conversation of the conflict between Kentucky and Tennessee, there's always been the Bourbon Trail, right? And we always got a little bit of tourism from that. People wanting to go see something slightly different, so they go 2 hours out of the way. But the Tennessee Whiskey Trail has really created some good awareness for tourists coming through Tennessee to see what we're doing with whiskey here.
Yeah, all of this, all really, really, really important. And I like the fact that Tennessee, this sort of regionality of places and people coming together and forming guilds and bonds and all of this kind of thing. Some people see it as separate, separating things. It's not. It's just differentiating a little bit. There's not, the whole whiskey world's not that big really, and everybody kind of helps each other out. People get into one whiskey, they tend to get into another one.
100%. And internally, we always talk about how we can help other distilleries coming up, whether it's talking them through the engineering bit of their distillery itself, or talking to them about what kind of unique things they can do to their spirits or packaging design and everything. Like you said, it's a fairly small community, and it's very supportive of each other. We're not out there trying to bash each other over the head and steal each other's customers.
No, I always say the same thing. A rising tide lifts all ships. People helping each other out. Some guys like one brand, they like another one, and if they like that brand, they think themselves, well, maybe try something else. And anybody I know who likes whiskey ends up building up a bit of a collection. That nobody really drinks one little brand ad infinitum.
All right.
Now, before you go, I must ask you, because it's on the website, and I have to ask you, what's Pizza and Copper? The cats.
Copper and Pizza. Those are our Mouser cats. So Pizza was our Mouser over at our Marathon Motorworks distillery location for I guess about 8 years. She just retired. She was sent off to a farm in New Jersey to live out the rest of her days. And Copper is our Mouser over at our headquarters on Merritt. Yeah.
I salute both of them. I hate mice.
I'm a cat person. I love cats.
I love cats.
I love cats too.
I love cats.
You beat me to it this week, Marty. I was going to ask them about the cats.
Yeah, I read the website first.
All right, Ryan Schremmel from the Corsair Distillery, Tennessee, and other places around those parts. Thank you very much for joining us on Irish Whiskey Review. Catch you again sometime.
Ryan, thank you
guys so much. It was a pleasure.
So there we have. But whenever we talk about cats, I love so many cat people out there, including Justin, which is a strange thing because he normally hates everything else.
No, I like cats. Almost like cats as much as I like zodiacs. Rib Commander up there, we had to explain what a zodiac was to me. I knew what a zodiac was, but a rib is what we call them here. It's not just something you eat, Kerry.
Oh, gotcha.
Justin always fancies a boat. I really could see it. See, in Tennessee, you wouldn't have boats particularly because it's landlocked.
No, they have boats.
No, we've got boats. I've got a place down on Pickwick Lake. It's right there on the border of Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. And in fact, the Cumberland River runs through the middle of Nashville. And then we're not far from the Tennessee River, which is in between Nashville and Memphis.
Ah, nice. See, Justin, I'll be there. Justin would like all that.
I knew that spring break there would be my ideal of heaven.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Justin, if you like cats, Corsair's not the only one. We've got a lot of distillery cats around Tennessee.
You should do a website, Tennessee Whiskey Cats. That would be a big thing. People could come and pet a cat.
Now, a whole new audience for the Tennessee Whiskey Trail.
Mine are English bulldogs.
Oh, I do like a bulldog. Bulldogs are so cute.
I've got 2 English bulldogs, Fred and Roscoe.
Oh, get a page for them too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Like, one thing I'm just going to ask. You see, in terms of the amount of revenue that comes in through from the whiskey trail, from the whiskey distilleries. I mean, it must be getting to a point where financially it must be a massive revenue for the state and along with the tourism.
On a lot of different levels. Yeah. I mean, obviously, whiskey is a very heavily taxed industry. So there's a lot of, sales tax, all the taxes that come back into the general fund for the state. But then on top of that, we have our distilleries that purchase corn locally. So we've got that going back into our agricultural system. The tourism dollars that they're bringing in. So when those tourists come, they don't just spend dollars at our distilleries. They go and stay in our hotels. They buy in our restaurants. And then you've got, other ways that they give back to their communities. So, for instance, actually at the start of the pandemic, when hand sanitizer was in such short supply, almost every single distillery in the state of Tennessee pivoted and started producing hand sanitizer instead of whiskey for a while, including Jack Daniels. And they did it on a large scale, and everyone was able to give back. A lot of them donated it to first responders and helped keep a lot of frontline workers safe. So it's a good bunch. I love this crew. They're a great bunch.
It is. Now, Ryan mentioned that the food and beverage scene in Nashville and Tennessee, obviously the likes of yourself, Kerry, is exciting and moving on. Tell me a bit more about that. Tell me a bit more about the different, certainly in Nashville for yourself, Kerry, the whole.
Sure. So we've got a very vibrant food scene, and the great thing about the food scene in Tennessee, or in Nashville in particular, is that most of the chefs and cooks get along great, and owners. So we have a very robust and very tight-knit restaurant community. We've got great restaurants, everything from Dynamite Italian to barbecue to hot chicken to just about anything that you could want. We got some fabulous steakhouses here in town. And, Nashville now, whereas West Tennessee and Memphis was really the barbecue capital of Tennessee, now Nashville really has come into its own with barbecue. And a lot of those people are transplants either from Memphis or families came from Memphis. And Nashville can stand its own against Memphis any day of the week now with barbecue. And so, it's been great because even though I have competitors here in the barbecue industry in Nashville, we're all close friends. We all go have drinks together. And same with the restaurant community. Most everybody gets along. And if somebody needs something, then we're there for them. And like you said, a rising tide will lift all ships. And that's the way we feel here in town. We had a tornado before the pandemic. 10 years ago, we had a big flood. And you saw the Nashville restaurants and restaurateurs spring into action and really step up and help feed everybody. During the pandemic, we fed 34,000 people in a 14-day period. And that was just my restaurant. We passed that torch on to Martin's, one of my friends and competitors, and they fed another 34,000 over the next 14 days. And these are stories that you see all over Nashville. This is how our community comes together. It's one of the reasons why they call us the volunteer state. Tennesseans are there to pitch in and help. When we have a national disaster or a natural disaster, you don't see Tennesseans whining about where's the federal government to come in and help us.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Off and we get the job done. And
I salute you, sir.
Tennessee great is, my neighbor is not waiting for Uncle Sam to come and bail him out. I'm stepping over the fence and I'm coming over there and I'm going to help him clean his house up and get his things in order, because that's what neighbors do. And that's what good people in Tennessee do. And that translates into our whiskey and into our industries, into the restaurants. And it's a friendly place to be. We get along with the other distillers and we get along with most of the other people in this industry. We want to promote it together, and we want people to come here, and I want them to drink my bourbon, and I carry Nelson Greenbrier on my shelf. I carry Corsair on my shelf. I carry Jack Daniels, George Dickel. And so we support everybody, and we want you to try the variety that's available in Tennessee. My bourbon's different than Pennington's bourbon with their Davidson Reserve. But we work together. They bottle for me right now, and we've both got unique but great products, and that's a great thing about Tennessee.
Kerry, that's brilliant to hear. It's almost seen as being a bit old-fashioned to be nice to people, which is ridiculous.
Not here in Tennessee.
Yeah.
We may greet you with a handshake, but you're leaving with a hug.
We aren't allowed to hug here yet.
No.
Yeah, that's been a hard part for me. I haven't been able to handle the no hugging thing.
No, I think we're coming to the end of all this. It seems as if we've sort of turned a corner and it's all coming to an end, and hopefully we'll get moving about and going places and so on and so forth. But I do think the whiskey community, there's something special about people in the whiskey industry. There really is. It's the amount of people who see their competitors as their friends and do help each other out. And it's great to hear, because it's kind of the same here in Ireland. It's a very small community. People had this idea that Irish whiskey was a huge industry and that, Irish whiskey was famous throughout the world. At one point, there was really only 2 distilleries in the whole of Ireland. There was pretty much nothing. And the guys there really do help each other out. And I see very much a similarity between Ireland and Tennessee. It's growing. They have an old tradition, but it kind of died away, and now it's coming back with a vengeance, And I think there's a lot of similarities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, how did you manage to get the legislator to give you the sort of Tennessee sort of area of control? Was it the rye, Marty, that they have a sort of area of
you're
standard?
No, you're talking. We interviewed a while back about Indiana rye whiskey. It's now a protected product. You have to have legislation in place for that. Kind of similar to Scotland and Northern Ireland, or Northern Ireland and all of Ireland. So you have bourbon, and now you have Tennessee, all as a definition. Do you see wider places in the US having some more regionalities in the US? Because it's flourishing all over.
I haven't heard of any other states or regions really attempting to create it in their code, because it's actually in Tennessee law. It wouldn't surprise me though. I mean, as you said, the industry is absolutely booming. Almost every state now has some sort of association or guild that's working towards, helping relax some of those laws that are around the liquor industry. The Tennessee Distillers Guild has had to do a lot of work to create an environment that's welcoming to distilleries. I mean, we fought for legislation to allow our distilleries to serve cocktails. We had to fight against a barrel tax. We've done, just having distilleries across the state, as I said, since 2009, we've had to do a ton of work. So it's not always easy, but when things like Tennessee Whiskey Day help us show the impact that we have, which hopefully, when it comes time for us to put up new legislation, hopefully our legislators will take stock of all the impact that we do have.
Yeah. Kerry, there's a big move away from the white spirit industry, which was, lots of people used to drink vodka with such. There's a big move away now to your brown spirits, much more flavour, which is in some ways translated as well into food. There's people now taking much more seriously. I want flavour food. I not just the sort of cheaper, convenient, easy takeaway food, if you like. There's people going for that, which is really feeding into what you do. Pardon the pun.
Well, and Tennessee whiskey is very accessible. That's what's nice about it. Everyone feels comfortable drinking it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, you want the depth of flavor. When you look at a vodka, people say, well, it should be tasteless and odorless. Well, why do you want to drink that if you just to get drunk? You've got a depth of flavor with whiskey and with bourbon that can be a complement to food and plays in the complexities of the food. Like I said, with whiskey, cutting through the fat is really great in fat-heavy dishes like a pork belly or like a brisket, and it does complement it. And so, almost like a fine wine, you compare that whiskey with different meats. I did an interview and a tasting for Bourbon Plus magazine last year with Steve Combs, one of their writers, and we did a tasting of 4 different bourbons with various meats. We did, chicken, which we call a yard bird, and we did brisket, and we did pork. And it was nice to see which ones paired the best with which of those meat samples. And it was a great fun tasting, and it does have its complexities.
Justin, we missed that.
I know. That sounds good. We actually did a similar thing last year with a Slemish Market Supper Club, and he actually made 4 dishes, and one of them was actually seaweed. Which is. I mean, have you ever tried seaweed? Either of you? It's what you call rack. You would call it rack. It comes in from the ocean. It's like plant life that washes up, and we actually. Along with Japanese, we have a thing called dulce here, and you can eat dry seaweed, but it's an acquired taste, to say the least. But
it's very salty and crispy, so it's kind of like an alternative to bacon, if you really want to put it like that.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Rob, the chef, so I'm talking to Rob, and all you see is Justin's wee fingers coming in, just lifting my bed and sneaking out, and me sitting there going, "I'll kill him," But it's got a lovely. Salty, crispy. It's crispy and salty, similar to bacon, and it goes really well with alcohol as well. It goes really well with a whiskey.
Yeah.
But listen, it's been fabulous talking to you both this evening, Kerry, Bringle, from the.
Before we go, can I just ask Kerry, where did the name Peg Leg Porker come from?
I told you not to ask that. I told you not to ask that.
I know you did, but I sort of.
I literally am the peg leg porker. So I've got one leg. I am a above the knee amputee on my right leg. And I lost my leg to osteogenic sarcoma bone cancer when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And then did heavy rotation of chemo. And I'm a very lucky man. I'm lucky to be alive. It was a very aggressive cancer. And all I lost was my leg, and I didn't lose my life. And so I took that and turned it around into a positive, and it shows in our products and in our brand. And so that the brand was born out of my, zest for life and realizing how lucky I am. And so when you talk to me, you're literally talking to the peg leg porker.
Well, Kerry, we're lucky to have you too. We're lucky to have you, pal.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. I have to ask it on camera. I've already asked it. Are you anything to Keith Urban, Sara Beth?
I like to say Sara Beth Urban, just like Keith, but not as exciting. But maybe now that I work for the Distillers Guild, maybe more exciting.
Yeah.
Probably.
But listen, thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
There you go. Full details are on screen of where you can get in touch with the Tennessee Whiskey Trail and Peg Leg Porker as well. I'm Justin McCartney. He's been Marty McCauley. We've had Kerry Bringle and Sara Beth Urban with us tonight. Thank you very much, guys, and good night. We'll catch you tomorrow night, Marty, actually again at 10 p.m. British Summer Time. What's on the show tomorrow night?
Well, we're going to do our weekend whiskey as usual. And then, well, you were down here last night and you went away with a whole armful of my whiskey. We're going to do a little bit of a tasting, and I'm going to explain something to you tomorrow night.
We're actually at Kerry and Sara. We're going to get into a time machine, and we're going to go back in time and get whiskey from 50, 60 years ago and get the same product from today, and we're going to compare them. And you might think they're both the same, but I've already had a taste of them.
I told you not to. I know
you told me not to, but honestly, they're completely different. So I don't know how
these are common brands. So I have quite a large whiskey collection, and so I decided the other day to compare old style whiskey. We'll see what it is tomorrow with the latest version tonight. And I sent Justin away with about half a dozen samples last night.
And also the Corsair guy who contributed tonight, he couldn't join us live. We actually have a podcast. I think that's going up this Wednesday on Anchor and wherever you get your podcast from. You can just ask your smart speaker to get the podcast. The Corsair distillery is an audio one in full. You've seen what he looks like. So that one with Ryan Schremmel is up there from Wednesday at sort of midnight our time. So that's by the time you get up. No, that's Tuesday. Wednesday our time's Tuesday your time. I forget. What time is it with you? Is it coming up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
It's almost 3, yes.
In Nashville. It's time for afternoon tea here, okay? That's what you would have if you were at the Savoy, afternoon tea. It costs about £100 and you get sandwiches that wouldn't choke a donkey. They're that size. They're wee tiny sandwiches. But it is very nice. If you're ever in the Savoy, do try it, and you can obviously try.
I can't comment on that because I've never been in the Savoy. It's only Justin, Moneybags Justin, you know.
I was fixing to say, I was like 3 p.m. on a Friday in Tennessee. It sounds like it's early happy hour time.
Oh, yeah. It usually is, I would imagine. So listen, thank you again very much, guys. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. We'll catch you all again soon. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.